Welcome, everybody, to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. And if this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that today's episode is one that will have you coming back for more. And if you're a returning listener or viewer of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back. And I hope that today's episode is one that you find informative, enlightening, and as always, insightful. So before we get into the main event, for my people who are on YouTube, please hit that red subscribe button so you can get future notifications on new episodes. And if you're listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you subscribe there as well. For those who have asked questions about how they can contribute to the growth of this podcast financially, we have 4 pathways in which you can do that. The first is through Cash App, using our handle $IDTALK4ED. If you have Venmo, you can use our handle @Kwame SM. That's KWAMESM for those who are listening. And then for those who have PayPal, you can use our URL paypal.me/KwameSM. And then for our dedicated listeners and viewers of the podcast, over the past couple months, we've created a community space for you all called the Forum. So this will provide you with some perks and some behind the scenes footage of the podcast and other things as a token of our appreciation for all the support you've given us. So if you're interested in learning more about the perks and all the membership tiers, you can go to our main website at IDTALK4educators.com. And then for our readers, if you haven't ordered a copy of Learning to Relearn, please make sure you do that before the summer ends. There's still time. Matter of fact, I think it's a 20% discount on all online book platforms for it. So make sure you add that to the library. And a special thank you for those who have been providing support for this book, whether you've shared it with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, whether you've left a review on any of the book platforms, whether you've even done a testimonial or had a selfie with the book. All that support is appreciated. Now, if you want to learn more about what this book is about and you haven't ordered a copy, you can go to our main website at learningtorelearn.com. and you'll be able to get access to some free resources that help you get your school year to a great start. So make sure you visit us there. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. So as you can see by the format, those who are watching, I left a little bit of space because we got 2 special guests today. And as you all know, we have a phenomenal book that has just been released called Pedagogies of Voice. And I'm just excited to bring these 2 phenomenal educators on to close out our Pedagogies of Voice series. So over the past couple of months, I've had co-authors of the book come on to share. We started off with Dr. Crystal Watson. And then about a month ago, we had Dr. Sosan Jaber. And they went on to share glowing things about the book. And now we have 2 more authors who are going to come on to complete the series. So without further ado, I want to bring on Shane Safir and Marlo Bagsik to the podcast to round off our Pedagogies of Voice series. So let's bring Shane and Marlo on. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, Kwame. Hey, Marlo.
Hello. Hi, Shane.
How are we doing?
I'm doing fabulous as I can.
I know.
Yeah. Really grateful to be in community with you. I think we've all been following your work with just, eagerness and enthusiasm, and love what you're putting out in the world, love the way you show up, and just honored to be invited to join you and be in community this morning.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, the feeling is absolutely mutual. So I know our time is limited, so I want to get us right in. So
let's do it.
You all are tuning in from the West Coast out in Cali. Bay Area specifically, if
Yes.
I'm correct.
Oakland.
Not today for
Oakland,
me. Not too
okay,
much.
the town.
Yeah,
All right,
yep.
the town. Yes. So I know with this podcast, we always like to start from the beginning. And I've had a chance to learn a little bit about your stories throughout the journey of you all writing this book, which I know was very much an emotional one, which we'll talk about later on. But I'd love for you to just share with our audience to start us off. For each of you, who or what inspired you to want to become an educator?
Well, good morning again. I'm actually not in Oakland today. I do live in the town, very close to Marlo, about a mile away. But I am up in Whitefish, Montana today in Mountain Time
Okay.
Zone visiting my mom, and I'm on the traditional territories of the Salish, Kootenai, and Pendore people. And it's fitting that I'm here because when I thought about this beautiful question, who or what inspired me, I think about my mom and my late stepfather, who transitioned almost exactly 2 years ago in this very home that I'm in. They were in the Bay Area in San Jose. He was a career high school educator in East San Jose. He taught English and woodshop. He had a woodshop. And my mom was also a public servant. She was an RN for the Santa Clara County. And she worked on the front lines of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in the 80s when there was so much fear and so much anxiety and misunderstanding. And I feel like I learned so much from both of them about public service, about relationships and community, but really at the root about what it means to move with radical love for the people that you serve. And they both did that. I mean, when we had my stepfather's service here a couple years ago, there were students taking the train from San Jose to Montana, his former
Wow.
students, to see him. I mean, he kept in touch with one of his former students who just got released from San Quentin after 25 years, and I am now getting to know really well. He loved his students, and he showed up for them and cared for them and gathered them and mentored them. And my mom, whew, I mean, her patience, she worked later in her career with the homeless and recently incarcerated, and her patients just loved her, and she showed so much care and compassion and grace. So I think that's those two humans who built and lived in this house together really were one of my big inspirations.
They carry on the legacy very well, as we can see. Yeah,
Trying.
Marlo, yes.
Yeah, that's a huge question. I do love talking about it too. When I think about who I specifically call in my ancestor, my grandmother on my maternal side. Her name is Cecilia Arquico. I kind of write about her in the book and bring her in as an inspiration because she actually was an educator herself in the Philippines. And my mom had told me stories of being in her class. And she was the one of 7 children to only have taken her class. So all of our other children didn't take her class, but my mom had that experience. So it was really like getting those gems of stories and story orientation from my mom have just been gold for me. But I think about her and I bring her into the space because she's someone that like had all these nuggets of just like wisdom that she would pour into all her 17 grandchildren. And one of them was education is something that no one can steal or take away from you. And so like that kept on like whispering in the back of my mind. As I found myself in education. It wasn't my first career, actually. I graduated in 2008, the recession. I was here in the Bay Area, graduating from Cal, Berkeley, and I had nowhere to go because like all jobs were frozen. So I did retail management for a little bit. But this is the what that got me to education. My grandmother passed, and in that passing, I just reflected on her life and what she meant to me, and something just poured into me, and I was like, I I didn't go to I didn't go to Berkeley to be a retail manager. I just can't. That was something I did prior to get me to college. But then when I prayed and meditated on it, there was just this deep calling for me to do the thing, go and be a teacher. And it just felt so right. And it has ties to my identity because when I think back at the times that I felt like most like free was when I was doing work in organizations at Berkeley when I was teaching workshops. And I was like, yeah, duh. I was doing queer workshops, advancing, like, and that was where I found myself, like my queer self. And I was like, yeah, this feels right. And how do I take this energy and like make it a living? And so like I just hear her even right now just saying, yes, I'm proud of you. Like keep going, keep going. You're doing it. And it just makes me feel so whole that as an educator, I was able to bring that into my classes, because when I shared these stories, even with students, they love it, right? Like they connect to it. And so I'm just super grateful to have a grandmother like her, even to still be alive in spirit right now with me, to inspire me, even on this journey. I feel like her presence is here right now.
You know, as I'm listening to the two of you share about your parents and your ancestors, I can hear the emotion in your tone. And I could
Mm.
only imagine how difficult it was at times to even write this book, because it triggers some of those emotions that you're all exuding as you're
Mm.
sharing these testimonies about your parents. So, I mean, that alone has me excited to learn more about just how you all got here. But I want to talk about your K-12 journey. So, with the two of you being queer humans, Shane being a white woman of Irish and Jewish descent, and then with you, Marlo, navigating life as a Filipino American,
Mhm.
I'm curious to know, with those identity markers, what was it like to navigate the K-12 school system? And were there any challenges along the way that made it hard for you to really be your full self in that space and even beyond that?
Do you want me to go? I have a response to
Go
that.
for it. Yeah, you should start.
My K through 12 experience was very interesting. I feel, well, first off, I'm a diasporic baby. I'm a first generation Filipino American. And, you know, when I think back at my K through 12 experience, I think about how much I played school, played the game of school to succeed, and hid a lot of parts of myself so that I
Mm-hmm.
could assimilate to the dominant culture. And I think about that so deeply because it's been a journey to undo that and to like actually unlearn all of the things that was taught to me. And I'm getting emotional because I think about what that cost was. It was the cost of me and my parents not getting one another. It was the
Yeah.
cost of my parents trying to uphold cultural values from the Philippines, to survive and to still honor who they were, but me to negate it and say that's not the right way to do it. That's what it sounded like in the at home, right? And like it felt like we were just so disconnected from another, and it's because I was really being raised in a household culturally Filipino, but then in a world outside that was absolutely not accepting or embracing that part of me and asking me to hide that part of myself. And on top of that, the intersection to this is my queerness. Like layered in both of those experiences, both in the home and in my K through 12 experiences. I think about all the ways in which I had to hide that, and I think about the dreaming question: what would it have been like had I been able to be free and open, from the very start of when I knew I wanted to explore certain things, versus having to survive and play school. And so I think I did that, and I honor all the people that continue to do that to survive, because I think that that's a survival mechanism. Um, because the system is brutal. But I'm out here thinking, how do we do and reshape school so that those experiences are not common, and that's not the only way to succeed and feel embraced, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And a while back, maybe a couple years ago, I actually had Tony De La Rosa on this podcast.
Oh, he's amazing.
So
Amazing.
it's my guy.
I love
And he shared some similar stories, particularly lunchtime stories,
mm,
you know, and how that really made it difficult for him to fully embrace the Filipino identity, and how traumatic that was. So when you're
Mm.
sharing, it just took me back to some of the
mm.
testimony that he shared. And then for you, Shane, what was it like for you?
Yeah, thank you, Marlo, for going first and always modeling vulnerability and truth telling. I so appreciate it. I love this question, even though it's hard to answer. It is emotional. I think for me, the primary struggle in the high school era was an internal one around queerness. And I think we're going to talk a little bit later about the relationship between street data and pedagogies of voice. But when I think about the street data model, I feel like one root of that model was the reality that for me, the satellite data looked good. I was a high performing student, but my internal world was so fractured and I was so alienated and disassociated. And nobody in my, I went to K-12 big public schools in California. Nobody was asking for that street data. Nobody wanted to know like what's happening, like how are you feeling, the level of depression or suicidal ideation, which is so prevalent for queer LGBTQ teens, was just like a completely internal experience. And I felt grateful for surviving that. But the way I navigate it was just really masking, right? And just looking successful and over functioning, but at a great cost, right? To selfhood and to belonging. And that's something that I've, wrestled with really throughout my life. And I appreciate you mentioning also just like my more ethnic identities and whiteness. I think on the Jewish side, there was just a lot of, without saying too much, a lot of assimilation, a lot of like not owning that identity or being like connected to it to the point of like my last name being mispronounced, right? And having to learn and recover the correct pronunciation of my last name, the meaning of it in Hebrew, which is a scribe. What an honor to hold that name as a writer. And I think too about, my experiences as a young adult in college working in the Rhode Island youth prison system and maybe the positive dissonance of really confronting my whiteness for the first time being in the youth prison system, right? And understanding beginning to peel the layers of structural racism and how white boys I'd grown up with who'd committed the same kind of infractions were not incarcerated, right? And watching all these brilliant young people in the system not getting a chance, being shut out from opportunity, I think that also really fueled for me all of this work that I continue to do.
And then Shane, I want to stay with you for a second because I want to transition now into the work that each of you are doing. So I had another good friend of the two of you, Jessica Wei Huang, a while back. And I know,
Great.
Shane, you work with her up June Jordan School.
Yep.
And she just said glowing things about you at that time.
That's my sister.
Yeah. And I know she contributed to the book as well, which is awesome because she's amazing. But I wanted to ask you, being a principal at the time at the school and thinking about everything that Pedagogy of Voice represents, I'm wondering how that experience in leadership helped to influence the approach you took in contributing to the book.
Oh, it's an interesting question. Well, I think our school really attempted to embody this idea of student voice and agency in its design and in its pedagogy. Whether I think about the performance assessment system through which students graduated by portfolio and presenting their work to a committee of peers and adults and community members and significant adults. Or I think about, a training I got to lead on Socratic seminars with staff where we just sat in circle and talked about Freire's work and people practiced these ways of engaging. Or even the idea that we had a junior institute and a senior institute. So 9th and 10th grade was junior institute, 11th and 12th, Jessica may have spoken to that too. And really try to think developmentally about how 9th through 12th, what's the pathway to really developing student sense of voice and agency? And what are those micro experiences that lead to that? And so I think a lot of the seeds of Pedagogies of Voice were both in my classroom at Balboa High School in San Francisco prior to the principalship, but also at June Jordan School for Equity. And I was fortunate to be a principal who got to teach. So I co-taught multiple classes when I was a principal.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Including one on a literature class that I built with my colleague Jackie Jenkins about alienation in literature, and really just sat in circle with kids talking about Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin, The Yellow Wallpaper, like just these incredible stories of women and Black folks and people of color and what, how people mediate alienation in an oppressive society. So, I think leaving that environment, like the rest of the world, the education world doesn't necessarily look like that. I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to any of us. And so my struggle in the last 10, 15 years of this work outside the system is like, well, how do you create the conditions for this in systems that are built in colonial ways, in racist ways, that are built to suppress young people and really to engender the kind of electoral results we have right now by stripping critical thinking and critical consciousness from the curriculum? What does it look like to help system leaders all the way to the classroom really reimagine and reorient toward what we're trying to do with this book, which is awakening student voice?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then Marlo, so I know for you, you spent a lot of time as an English teacher, taught for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know how you're able to shift your mind towards understanding the importance of street data, first of all, how that was introduced to you, and how did that lead to you prioritizing that integration of student voice into your curriculum and just instructional design as a whole?
I love this question. And I have the lovely Shane here with me, who invited me, and we worked with each other at our district when we brought her on, or they brought her on as a consultant. And then I read her book, and I was like, I mean, I don't know if I could cuss in here, but I was like, oh shit, this is like,
go for it.
I was like, holy shit, this is something I needed to hear. This is confirming my ways of being. I thought I was sitting here resisting all this, but here's someone putting it out in the world and normalizing it and saying yes. And so when I read that book, it was remarkable in a way that, like, at that point, I was already close to 10 years of teaching in the classroom. So gathering street data, or the term street data, when I read it, I was like, I'm kind of already doing that, right?
Right.
I'm already operationalizing, and I've done it, but not and like, the tension in the classroom as a teacher for me was like, you hear these big things like, oh, everybody graduates, equitable for all, right? Like, we need to disrupt these outcomes, yada, yada, yada. But then we're so situated in the classroom with these like really rigid ways and structures that limit us. So early on in my career, I was like, nah, that doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, so what can I do to really be with the people? And the people are my kids or my students. And so I found and tested ways to like invite their voice very early on. I remember even in my student teaching, my mentor teacher, who I still love today, I was like asking her, so how do you get to know the kids? She's like, oh, that just happens throughout the year. And I'm like, but how are you going to grade them next week in the first 2 weeks if you don't know them? That's not fair. There was something like already like glaringly like screaming at me in my first like pre-service years. Like, there's something wrong with this. We need to know the kids before we're going to assess them. And if I'm the one to assess them, I can't just treat them like numbers. And so like I created like a way to, the big issue is, how do I get them to tell me something and put forward what they are bringing already, so that I could already have like some sort of baseline of who they are. And I just created a letter to teacher, like, tell me anything about you. There's no judgment, right? Like, that to me now, like in 10 years later, is like, that's street data. I was using street data to practice. Before I was to even implement any sort of curriculum, I had to know who am I dealing with and how much trust can I build. And so I was really trying to think about the micro moves that I could use to both use this data to have deeper relationships with my students, but then also teach them to have deeper relationships with themselves, right? So this data was not just used in private, it was used anonymously and like kind of aggregated down, saying, hey, this is what you all are feeling, I'm going to make adjustments. And then when street data came out, it just crystallized that for me, because at that point in my career, this is, I think, a common for empathetic teachers that just love doing and wanting to do right by kids. They're found in this tension point, like, I want to do right, but I can't because the system's not letting me. But then they have to choose against what they're being asked to do. And when I read street data, I was like, oh no, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow it. And it just it got me to the place where my heart was screaming to live in as an educator, and it, like I said, crystallized the way of being and constantly using students' voices, and keeping them at the center, specifically students at the margins. Because if we're going to redesign systems, let's do it. Let's do it right, and that's where we start.
The Identity Talk for Educators Live podcast is just one piece of the work that we do under Identity Talk Consulting, which we've had since 2019. And since then, we've had the privilege of working with 40 different schools, districts, and organizations across the globe. And we want to continue to add to that number in this new year. So if you are a school, if you're an educator or an organization that's looking to receive professional development and consulting services within any of our pillars, whether it's anti-bias, anti-racist practices, culturally responsive teaching, or identity affirming education, we are the firm for you, and we love to learn more about your needs. When you have a chance, make sure you go to our website at identitytalk4educators.com to learn more about our services and to schedule a discovery call today. We love to hear from you. Yeah, for sure. And what's interesting about this is a lot of what we do in our education systems that are humanizing are so antithetical to the original orientation of what this education system is designed to do. And that's still a challenge even to this day, to the point where you get penalized for being humanizing, for incorporating street data during evaluations, during observations. I'm even thinking back to stories when I was in the classroom and I was doing things that may not be your traditional metrics that we go by in order to assess whether students are growing. So, you start the school year, there's always, okay, what's your student learning goal? What's your professional practice goal? How many percentage points will your students grow after taking this state test? And I'm like, well, for me, it's secondary. Given some of the trauma, given some of the baggage and the issues that they're coming in with, if they're able to come to school with at least 80 to 85% attendance, that's growth for me, because I know how difficult it is to even get to school. Like, students don't have access to transportation. Some students aren't able to come every day because they got to take care of a sibling at home or a parent. So, like, there's so many different factors that are overlooked when we do have this conversation around data, and more specifically reliable data, because I even think that can even be subjective when we start to really dig deep into that conversation.
Agreed.
But yeah, so thank you all for sharing that, because it really just got me thinking. But I do want to talk about the book. It's finally here. I feel like I've been talking about it forever, and now people are able to access it. So, as I mentioned earlier, I can see that this was an emotional journey, really, for all four of you. I had a chance to listen to Crystal and Sosan's story and how that really connected with them. So now that you all are here, I'd love for you to just share what that process was like, getting this book together, collaborating, and really just having these rich discussions. And what do you hope that people will gain after reading this book, especially given what's happening right now?
Right, because we could not have predicted the moment this book would be born
Not
into,
at all.
right? No one can predict when their baby will be born and what the conditions will be, but here we are, right? So this book, I can start on this one. This book is my third book, and it feels very, very different from the other two in a few ways. For the first way is that it's the first book I've written that is fully kind of collaboratively authored with this team. Folks who read Street Data know that it features two brilliant chapters by Dr. Jamila Dugan and Carrie Wilson that added so much to that book. But what's distinct about this book is that although I was the primary writer of it, we collaborated on all the chapters, the four of us, right? And these guys reviewed every page, every word. We're part of like the design process. Like really, we were what Marlo calls a micro community. And the emotional piece that you named, Kwame, is really important because we did form this deep sense of family over time through not just treating writing this book as like a technical, thing, something we're going to check off or do, but through really trying to live and breathe the agency domains, to be in community with each other around our identities and stories, around what it means to us to belong in the world, and with each other over time, through practicing inquiry, asking hard questions in our meetings, and through finding our voices together and our collective voice. And so I hope that when people read it, they're going to feel that this isn't just like words on a page, that this is, as we say, a labor of love, a love letter, an invitation, something that is offered from like the really deepest parts of us. And the other thing I'll say about the process that's different from the other two books I worked on is we use the equity transformation cycle from street data to even formulate the proposal for this book. So before even offering to Corwin the table of contents and the proposal, we did 5 focus groups with about 30 to 40 educators from across North America. And we interviewed folks about what they wanted in a book, what they felt needed to be said about student voice and agency, what practices they would like support around, and what they might want to contribute. And a lot of those people from our focus groups ended up contributing artifacts to the book that Marlo was the lead curator around. So there's just this awesome synergy of, like, we went in with an inquiry stance. I wasn't sure. I heard Marlo say this on another podcast recently, and it's true. I wasn't sure I wanted to write another book. Writing a book is so hard. It's so emotional. It's so demanding.
But you do such a great job with it. Like,
thank you,
like
Kwame.
you strike gold every time.
I was not sure, and I needed to be convinced. And so as we listened to people and they shared their stories and their voices, it just became really clear what we needed to do. So I love that it was born out of the field and that it's born out of our family and our community that formed over time.
Absolutely.
What would you say, Marlo?
That was very beautifully said, and I'm just so appreciative and grateful to be part of this growing community. And you framed it as being emotional, Kwame, and you affirmed that, Shane. It still is very emotional. Like, it hasn't stopped. We're still there, and it's like, and my emotions. I've said this in our group. Like, my emotions are I'm most powerful when I'm emotional because it's speaking. My ancestors are speaking through my emotion, and that's how much heart and feeling has gone into this. Right. And the process in general was just like so much bigger than our individual, because it was something we know we wanted teachers to feel themselves. We know that their heart, or at least for me, like the way I felt and read street data, I'm like, I want this to crack open even more hearts. I want them to feel their own agency in what brought them to education to begin with. And the whole process in itself was healing. It was healing for me. It gave me a lot of hope and inspiration. Like, I'm like healing not just in my professional lens, but healing like even in a personal lens. Like, if we go in deeper into these domains, it's beyond, and that's what like true learning does, right? It's not just isolated to like a technical skill and say you check the box, you pass and go. It's kind of like it honors this idea that we all bring brilliance and wisdom into the spaces that we occupy, whether it's in class or outside. And what this does is it invites teachers to think about their classroom as incubator spaces, as collective spaces, as spaces for liberatory spaces, so that someone doesn't have to go into their class and feel like they have to check their identities at the door and say, keep that outside, we're going to just do this. What we're saying is, no, bring all of you, because all of that data and all of that street data matters. And we want to curate and cultivate an experience for you so that you feel whole, so you walk away feeling more whole. And even if that's just temporary because the world in itself is inequitable and the structures in place, at least those spaces can be spaces where students can feel seen. And if it's even, and that's what I know as a teacher, living and breathing, when I was able to cultivate that, the brilliance and the beauty in students, like I always pour their brilliance and remind them of that. And they're like, me? No. And I'm like, yes, you. Whether you believe it or not now, it's there. And so like for me, I really hope this book serves to touch the hearts of our teachers and educators all around. And it's a mirror to like say, like, you're seen and we see you. This is hard work and you're still there. Keep going. And let's find each other because we're living in such a divisive world right now that it's easy to just stay divided and isolated versus this is an invitation to be in community with each other.
All that is true, and it's something that has been a refrain on this podcast, as I'm sure you all know, just the importance of students being able to just come in as their full selves. And it's the goal. It's still the radical dream. And I just keep thinking about the fact that we're living in a society, especially now where we're seeing cis heteronormativity being pushed more than ever in our schools.
Yep.
We're also combating a lot of other negative forces. We're seeing identity affirming curriculum, humanizing curricula being censored by many of our elected officials, right? And you have teachers who really want to do this work with fidelity in the way that you all are articulating it, but they feel constrained. They feel like they don't have the full agency or the power to enact these transformational changes that you all are suggesting. So, Marlo, I want to know from you, what are some entry points that teachers can take to start combating some of these systemic changes that we're seeing, particularly those who feel like they're constrained and don't have the power to make those changes happen?
That's a really great question. And I love it that it's for teachers because teaching is an isolating profession. And I think I even say when I quote Toni Morrison, like, if you're free, your job is to free someone else, right? And so that tells me that teaching has an enormous amount of power. Should we want to use it in the direction for truth and love and justice and liberation? So for me, when I think back at my experiences, what were some of the small tactical things? It was really just thinking about like that pre-service teacher me, like, wait, this is wrong. Like I saw this rugged individualism and this competitive nature when I was entering the profession. Some are going to make it and some are not. And I'm like, wait, that doesn't feel right, right? Like, why can't we build systems where everyone and design for everyone? And to me, it was about feedback loops. So feedback has been literally part of my pedagogy. Like, how do I create curriculum based on the feedback I'm receiving, both for my students and even for my colleagues? I would invite that, and I love feedback. I think it's very healthy, but too often we don't even ask our students for it, and then we're just making assumptions and thinking that we're just the experts in the room. That because I went to college and have these degrees, I know more than you. And so what that looks like from a very practical standpoint is how I would pose the question or the inquiry: how are you collecting data from your students, and what questions are you asking of them to give you feedback on your curriculum or your instruction? It's as simple as that. And it's also doing it in a way that's not manipulative. Like, you could ask it, but then only highlight the thing that you wanted to hear. And that's using your power, right? But it's like,
That's right.
if you're walking and acting in integrity, you will say, hey, I heard you. There's X amount of people that are feeling X a certain way. I'm not going to put their names on the board, but I feel that we need to slow down, and I'm going to do that. And I've done that. And that, like, you just feel the energy in the room. I feel it right now, like in my body. It's just like, that's the energy that pours out, like that's building trust. And when you build that trust and you cycle it in, your students will show up and actually perform even higher for themselves, because they then have an intrinsic value to wanting to be in your class because they feel seen and heard and represented. That's one way. And then the one and done assessment, to me, why finals in 2 hours that is like what, 25% of your grade? That's crazy to me. Like I just had an entire semester and it comes down to this 2-hour performance task. So what I did was I was like, all right, if I have to do this, I'm going to budget 2 weeks of like reflection, peer feedback, one-on-one check-ins with me. So technically I was still doing the 2-hour final, but by the time they got to their final, guess what? They already had the feedback from their peers, from me and everything. And I was still and I wasn't, those are the small different moves, right? Operating within a very like secular system that keeps us divided, but always promoting this idea that it's okay to leverage each other's collective brilliance in the room. And that's when you get them, because they don't have to compete with each other. They actually start to cheer each other on. And I'm just there as a cheerleader, like, yeah, you could do it.
If we can just get to a point where we don't have to navigate the systems like this, and this is what I was reading this book about fugitive teaching. So fugitive teaching by Dr. Jarvis Givens. So just talking about Carter G. Woodson. Yep. And, this is exactly what he brings up in the book, how we have to even discreetly just navigate systems that we know are problematic, but we know that what we're doing is in the best interest of our students. That's something that I'm still even thinking about. But Shane, please jump in. What are your thoughts? Like, what are some things that we can do to continue to combat these barriers that feel constraining, but we know we can overcome?
Sosan is so articulate about this in terms of teachers finding their sphere of influence. And I think this book opens up countless entry points, right? What I love about it, but what I think will also be challenging for people about our book is that it's not a scripted curriculum. It's not an ABC, you'll get to D. It's really like a complex change model that requires activating your own agency. We talk about a seed store. We're inviting you into the seed store, and there's all these different pedagogical seeds you can plant, but you're going to be the one designing your own garden and planting your seeds. And I think a lot of times in Western education, American education specifically, people are looking for a solution, like a closed-ended lesson tool, framework, this, that, or they want people to direct them what to do. And we have lots of breadcrumbs, right, and directions that you can choose, but we're definitely not telling people this is what you should do. So I don't know. I love what Marlo said about just gathering that street data from your students. There's a whole chapter 2 in the book, that takes the street data model and applies it to Marlo's classroom through a story of how he did exactly that, right? And listened deeply to one student at the margins to transform everything, not just his own classroom and pedagogy, but the school culture, the way they gathered data on students across the school. So it's possible. And hopefully people will read this and feel that deep sense of agency. I can do something. I'm not stuck. Even in the most oppressive conditions, I have a zone of influence that I can stand within.
And I also feel like it's one of those things where we really have to rethink what student voice is, right? I think so often when we think about student voice, we think about, let's do a student council, or we'll have a student representative be a part of our board, which I've seen in the districts where I've taught in. But usually those are just checkbox items so that people have this illusion that, hey, we are inviting students to the table, but they don't really have the ability to share the concerns that they're experiencing in their respective schools, which is really interesting to me, because I feel like if we have teacher unions where we could file grievances and advocate for ourselves in that manner, why don't we have the same for students? Like I've been talking about a national student union where there's representatives from every state, and there is some legislation that has to be adhered to by these different schools. I mean, I feel like it's something that should have happened a long time ago, and it's surprising that it isn't when we think about the fact that students are our customers, and we're going to look at the customer service model. But I know this is a question I had for you, Shane, but Marlo, please jump in as well. I'm wondering, how can we ensure that student voice initiatives aren't performative like the ones I've mentioned and are really about allowing for students to have real input on how schools should be operating so that their experiences educationally can be enhanced?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're naming one critical piece, which is the performativity of a lot of the student voice work, which tracks to the performativity, I think, of a lot of equity work or the anti-racism initiatives that have no teeth behind them or don't actually center community and student voices. The second one that I want to name is that student voice is often a non-instructional initiative. So kind of like you named, it's something outside the classroom.
Like an elective type.
Policy. It's an elective, or it's students on the board or a student council or whatever, but it's not penetrating the instructional core.
Right.
And, you know, this book comes out of the principle in chapter 5 of Street Data that equity work is first and foremost pedagogical. And the young people are spending 6-7 hours of their day inside classrooms. So if we're just tinkering around the edges, right, and only centering students' voices when it's around policy or, you know, things like that, we're not operationalizing the commitment to students transforming their learning experiences. And that's what we're kind of trying to do here. But the other piece of it is, you know, I think there's often this binary of like, you can either be about student voice and identity and belonging, or you can be about like skill development, which is often paired with more direct instruction. And we actually name binary thinking in chapter 3 as one of 10 toxins that undermine student agency. And I think we are very much like a both and team and collective, a both and epistemology, where it's not an either or. We're defining student voice very expansively, that it is oral expression, but it's also written expression, artistic expression, nonverbal expression, dramatic expression, mathematical expression, and that all of that is a vehicle for skill development. All of that accelerates cognition if you do it with intentionality. So we got to stop putting ourselves into camps and silos where we're either about this or about that. No, these are pathways to activating students' voices in service of them becoming literate, numerate, self-expressive, agentic, and really able to transform the societies in which they live, right? That's the big dream in this book. And so I say that with a lot of passion. You can probably hear it in my voice, and a tiny bit of trepidation, because I know that runs counter to what some people think in the field. And that's okay. I think we are open. We want to be in dialogue around this, but we really do want to provoke this idea that it's an either or. Like, these things go hand in hand. And the starting point is bringing all of young people's sense of self into the classroom, their self-concept, their identity, which is, you know, a lot of your beautiful work, and that sense of belonging to something, an affective community, but also belonging to an intellectual community. That you have a right to learn, that you have a right to access complex text, that you have a right to critical thinking, and we're going to do everything we can to disrupt the narratives out there, the racist narratives, the anti-LGBTQ narratives that tell you don't belong here. That was a long answer. Sorry, I got a little bit passionate about that, but
you're good. You're good. You're good.
I can't follow that. Shane just mic dropped that, and I felt the ancestors in there. Like, she cruise to power, and I will just say that and leave it at that. Period.
Are you ready to take your commitment to identity affirming education to the next level? Then join the forum, the new and exclusive membership space for the Identity Talk community. With membership tiers starting at $3 a month, you'll get early access to podcast episodes, bonus content, our Quam's Quotes monthly newsletter, and monthly live Q&A sessions. You'll also unlock discounts on workshops and products, engage in community discussions, access exclusive community and networking opportunities, and even business ad roles during episodes if you're a sponsor level member. Whether you're an ally, advocate, co-conspirator, accomplice, or sponsor, there's a place for you in the forum. So head over to identitytalk4educators.com/pricing plans/list and join the movement today. Yeah. And the more I think about this book, the more I'm realizing that this isn't really a book that's about the technical aspect of what we do as far as teaching goes. This is really very much a book that's about mindset shifting.
Mm.
This is a book that's really about doing the internal work. You got to go back with this book. You have to really, as my good friend Dr. Elancely Ruiz talks about with the archaeology itself, you got to dig deep,
Yeah.
and we got to get to the source
Yeah.
of why you commit to some of the actions that you commit to as a teacher. Where does that come from? Where does that originate?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not just coming from a back,
Yep.
it's coming from somewhere spiritual,
Yes.
somewhere traumatic. Because I also believe that the way that we navigate life in the beginning, it tends to show up in the way that we instruct our students, in the way that we interact with them, in the way that we perceive them,
Yep.
and what they can do versus what they can't do. And then ultimately, it seeps into the way that we have conversations around data, to the point where you almost have like this hierarchy of what's more important. All right, this set of data versus this set. So there's a lot there when I'm thinking about this book. But I want to know from you all, just as you think about the book being out and everything that's going on, what continue to keeps you hopeful about what's happening and the possibilities as a result of this book?
Is it okay if I go first? Because I do have to hop off in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, go ahead, Shane.
I'm hopeful every time I look at the faces of Marlo, Sosan, and Crystal that we continue to wrestle with how to be in solidarity across our profound differences of life experience and identity, and to really model that for folks who are coming into this work. I'm hopeful that so many teachers are already expressing excitement about this book and putting their reactions out on social media. And I'm hopeful that, as Marlo said, that there's the potential for healing in the reading and the conversations that happen around this book, because I do think now more than ever, we need to be having and holding healing conversations with educators, that any technical shift, any pedagogical shift, any instructional transformation has to rest on a humanizing pedagogy for teachers and principals and educators. And we've tried to bring that into the book, and that concept, and that some guidance around how to do that in chapter 10. And it gives me a lot of hope. I really feel that is possible.
And then Marla, before I go back to you, because I know, Shane, you got a role, I got to ask you this question that we ask everybody.
Okay.
How do you stay true to the teacher in you?
Whew, that's a great question. Listen to my gut and my intuition, and meditate and journal almost every day.
Awesome. And very
Thank
concise.
you so much for having me. I really appreciate everything you're doing and the gracious invitation to bring us on today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all you do. You know, I've been an admirer of your work for a long time, so to finally have you on, it's an immense honor, and thank you for continuing to show up. Even though writing books are hard, I mean, I know that personally, so I
You
feel
do.
the choir.
Yeah.
But when it's done, when it's out in the world, it's the most gratifying feeling.
Yes.
Most gratifying feeling. So congrats to you and the rest of the co-authors on this effort, because this is a book that's really going to bless so many educators, and most importantly, so many young people who are in these classrooms.
Thank you, Kwame. I look forward to staying in touch and in community. And I'll talk to you real soon, Marlo.
Absolutely. All right, Marlo, let's switch up here. So same questions to you. What keeps you hopeful about the future and what this book can do for educators and students alike?
I think what keeps me hopeful is the power of collective. When we go back historically, when we think about history and the history of oppression and colonialism and all of the things, it's the guiding light. It's us together, it's this idea that no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. And the more
Yep.
we pour into that, and that norm comes from the Aorta Anti-Oppression Resource Center. And I use that a lot because I recognize that we're battling perfectionism, these white supremacist culture characteristics and all of that. But when we lean into like our ways of being that go way back to the indigenous times of living, it's always about the collective. And I'm very hopeful that people have a lot of heart and people come to education wanting to share it, wanting to grow it with their students, but they inherit systems that are problematized and already the problem, and then they start already behind deficit. But what keeps me hopeful is the people. When we do it together, when we align ourselves and we find ourselves in spaces where we get to deeply empathize and humanize one another, separate than the system, because we could blame the system. Let's blame the system, not blame each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what keeps me hopeful. And it's like, oh, I think about Toni Morrison, who says, who in her one of her responses in being interviewed, it's the grandeur of life is the attempt.
That's right.
And we really, it's that, right? I may not be living in a time where I get to see the fruits of the labor of this book, but it's the grandeur, the attempt. I'm putting it out there in the universe. We're putting it out there as a collective and gathering and hopefully uplifting and spotlighting some really wonderful educators out there that have already been doing the work. And I hope that people see that their micro moves in the work, it's powerful. Keep doing it and keep going.
And then, just like I asked Shane, how do you stay true to the teacher in you? And how do you stay fierce in your advocacy, as your last name suggests, because you are a fierce person? Bagsik, right? It's
Yeah.
what you do. It's what you do. So tell me, how do you stay true to who you are, brother?
I thank you for bringing that in. I really do meditate a lot on that and who I come from and the known and unknown ancestors that like literally have created my existence. That keeps me going. Like it's beyond me. This work is beyond me. My purpose is beyond me. I just get to live this body and this life for this moment, knowing in purpose that I just want a better future for our youth and a better future for our world, because right now it's just we can get so steeped in that darkness. And I think you talked a little bit about that image of going within, the light
That's right.
within, right? I'm a true believer, Kwame. Like, go to your darkest place and have radical faith and belief that there's light in there, and you'll find it. And that's what keeps me going as an educator, despite all the barriers against us. There's light there. Keep going, and you're not going to be alone in doing that. You don't have to be.
Well said. Well, Marlo, thank you for coming on, you and Shane. It's been a blessing learning about this book over the past few months. And I'm so happy that you all are experiencing the joy and the fruits of all of your labor and all of the hard work, all of the energy and the love that you poured into this book.
Oh,
And I
thank
know the ancestors are proud
you.
of this
Yeah,
final product. I know they're proud and they're watching over you all.
thank you so much.
So yeah. So before I let you go, please let people know how they can connect with you and how can they get a copy of this masterful piece of work.
Oh, thank you,
Talk
thank
to
you.
them.
Yeah, so Marlo Bagsik at all socials, whether it's X, LinkedIn, IG, just type that in and you'll find me there. To get the book, you could either go to the Corn website, which we recommend, the other website, Amazon. You can do that, but we get it for people that are boycotting Amazon. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. There's multiple places to get that book. If you type in, I think, POV 30, you could get a discount at Corwin if it's still available. But go to the Corwin website, corwin.com, and look up Pedagogies of Voice, and you'll see us pop up there.
All right. Y'all heard it, people. Get your copy today. Let's help it become a bestseller. But more importantly, let's buy the book, read it, and apply the information so that we can create better classrooms and better schools for our young people, because ultimately that is the goal.
Yes, yes, yes.
That
And
is the radical
reach out.
dream.
Reach out. We're open to be in dialogue. We know folks are doing some amazing work out there, just like you. And I'm so happy to have been on this with you.
Yes, it's an honor. It's an honor. And yeah, please continue to stay connected. And we're going to wrap it up here, people. So on behalf of Shane and Marlo, I wish you all good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. We are going to do this again another time.
Yes.
Peace out, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.